Hey, what's up, Silas here. It's good to report on my reading series. I'm just going to be reading the resignation letter that Glenn Greenwald just gave after he resignated from the Intercept. Okay, so Glenn Edward Greenwald, born March 6, 1967, we're over here. Wikipedia reading about him, is an American journalist, author, and former attorney. He's best known for publishing a series of reports detailing previously unknown information about American and British global surveillance programs. Hopefully, this read goes better than that. These reports were based on classified documents provided by Edward Snowden. So Glenn Greenwald worked as a constitutional attorney for 10 years before he began blogging on national security issues since 2005 in October, and then contributing for Salon and The Guardian. The Salon, I think, is a mostly online magazine, and The Guardian is one in the United Kingdom, and both of these are to the political left. I would say they lean to the political left. At the time, Greenwald was an opinion columnist, influential on the left wing in the United States. In June 2013, while at The Guardian, he wrote a series of reports on the documents released by Snowden. Along with other reporters, Greenwald won both a George Polk Award and a Pulitzer Prize for their reporting. He has also written best-selling books, including No Place to Hide. Later in 2013, Greenwald founded The Intercept with Laura Poitras, I think Laura Poitras, and Jeremy Scahill, where he co-edited for several years. In October 2020, he announced his resignation from the publication, accusing it of politically motivated censorship. Okay, so we're going to get to that soon. This is an article I was reading up on. My friend Steven had mentioned this to me, and I'm familiar with Glenn Greenwald as being one of the really good reporters out there. And on the screen, there's going to be speed drawing going on that you can find merchandise for in my merchandise store. That's kind of how I'm going to be tying some of these things in and wanting to do actual speed drawings that go along with the topic. And this one is going to be don't talk ished, stop talking ished, and no talking ished. And with these ones, I use these when I'm talking about topics, about topics with free speech and communication, and people saying you're not allowed to talk about this, or you should talk about this, or people making up things about people. Now, with this topic, you'll see that there's some people who are claiming that some of the content Greenwald was going to actually use is actually ish talk about one particular Joe Robinette Biden, Democratic candidate for the upcoming election in the United States of America that he is going to lose to Donald J. Trump. Okay, so that's kind of what's going with this one. Then there's also the ish talk in the other side where it's a free speech issue. Are you actually stopping people from talking in these kind of ways? And I read Barry Weiss's resignation letter. I also read something to do with the James Damore, what was it called? His manifesto? It was a manifesto, James Damore manifesto. It wasn't a manifesto, it was called something else. It was something he put out about the situation happening at Google. I actually personally know somebody that worked at Google that did come out and talk to Project Veritas about what was going on in Google. There's people who are coming out and speaking out against things that they're finding issue with. There was somebody else that came out. I don't know if it was Laura Logan. It might have been somebody else. There was somebody else from MSNBC that was a producer and that came out and said something. There's people who have come out and said that they are in certain environments and they are concerned about coming out as a conservative, as a supporter of Trump, or just not as a full-blown leftist progressive because of the environment that you have out there. And I'm asking people, why are you doing this? On one hand, okay, yes, I know there's risks to people's jobs, but I'm in a particular position where I understand there's certain things that I can talk about because of my financial issue, my life decisions and things like that, where I don't necessarily rely so much on other people speaking about certain things. But I've had people who look at my content and say, why don't you make content that's shorter? Why don't you stop talking about certain topics? And then maybe you'll actually get something that is more productive. But I consider these things to be really important. And if you too consider to be important, what is stopping you from talking out, from speaking out? What is keeping you in the position that you're in? This is a company Glenn Greenwald founded with these people, and he decided, no, I have to stand on principle and come out and speak out against this. And for the people on the political left, for the people who are progressives, for the people who are supposedly in this resistance, I call it the resistance, like resistance instead of resistance, because these are the things. This is the general thing that's accepted to be on this stance. So these people are saying, oh, we're Antifa, we're this and this, or we're the resistance, Black Lives Matter. Those people are things that these international organizations are signaling. The United Nations is talking about progressive things, critical theory, and things like that. You are not in the resistance. And despite all of that, you still somehow think that when you look at certain polls, people in that environment are going to come out and be open about their actual political leanings, about who they support and who they actually disagree with. When people literally get shot for being identified as a supporter of this, come on now. People are living in fear. Some people are living in fear accurately, some are not. I would encourage more people to speak, because I've had the experience of speaking out and end up meeting certain people and enriching my life by being more true to myself and being able to communicate with other people. And then you'll also attract other people that kind of share your value of being able to express yourself and discuss certain topics. Doesn't mean you have to agree on things, but I think you will find people who are willing to discuss actual topics, and it will enrich your life. So this kind of conversation that I'm having with Stephen, as he mentioned this, was something about the cracks in the ivory tower. And we were talking about alternative ways of actually discussing things, of actually making a living and communicating. And one of the things I find exceptional about the United States of America is it enshrines the free speech, the valuation of free speech in the actual founding documents of that nation. And that is something exceptional. That is not a common thing in just human existence, let alone the social constructs called civilization that have led to so much human flourishing. I'm going to be reading the United States Constitution just straight through tomorrow, and I'm going to post that up soon, because I think majority of the people have not actually read this Constitution outside of some kind of school thing, maybe during K through 12 or through some assignment in college or higher education, but actually choosing to actually read it and know what it's about. And let alone if you read it in that time, how much of what you learned in school do you actually still remember? And it's a rather excellent document, and I think it's worth actually reading, something I can refer back to. It helps me also jog my memory on certain things. There's easier ways to actually learn and understand things is by reading it, saying it out loud, then hearing it. So just to have that there, I think will be a positive thing, and maybe other people can listen to it. But coming back to Glenn Greenwald before I get into actually reading his letter that was on Substack, which is a new platform apparently where writers can go there and then actually make money from subscriptions. And we are living in this really unique time. We had the information age, and I think we're going to the age of understanding. And I was talking to Stephen how new systems are going to come. We're talking about how there's certain issues in the higher education system. People still want to learn information. People still want actual reporting. So you have a situation like this. Instead of having a situation where there's a 4-year degree from, you take the average cost of a 4-year degree in journalism. Somebody like Glenn Greenwald can now leave the Intercept and have his own independent thing, just be writing on Substack, or start something like with what Matt Taibbi does. I think, I'm forgetting what's the platform that Matt Taibbi uses. It's not too important right now, but he has his own place where he posts, and you can crowdfund. You can have people donate money to you and help you out in different ways. There's this No Agenda, the greatest podcast in the world that I listen to, and they have a value for value system where they just put out their content, and then the people who listen help them produce by sending in clips, sending in images, sending in graphics and things like that, or just donating how much they find is efficient. If they feel, okay, I have $300 is what I feel I've gained from actually listening to this over the last year, they send that in. If they want to do a subscription, they send that in. You can have that kind of system. And Glenn Greenwald, his content, his actual reporting is good enough to actually sell itself on that platform. Then on the education thing, on the teaching thing, he can also add the fact that he can just say, okay, I'm going to take on some apprentices. Let's say he has a home. He can just say, okay, I have a guest wing. I'm going to take on 2 people every year that can come and live with me and shadow me and work with me and learn from my craft. And he can just even charge him maybe even 1 semester, 1 year's cost of the average of a 4-year college degree at a top school in the United States of America. And I think what Glenn Greenwald would have to offer from that experience might be more valuable than actually working with going to an actual 4-year school, 4-year institution. And when it comes down to it, in something like this, you can practically see the work. You'll be able to see, are the articles, is the reporting that these people who are learning, who are apprenticing under Glenn Greenwald actually worthwhile actually paying for. And then from that point, those people can either emulate the same system that Glenn Greenwald is working with, or can go into a more traditional form of employment in the whole in the whole environment of journalism. So there's exciting things to be had, despite some of the negative and tough things that are happening. Right now, the election's about to happen. There's some people who are panicking. There's a lot of things going on that are very suspect with the censorship that has occurred around this recent thing with the Hunter Biden laptop being supposedly left off at the place and then released through Rudy Giuliani and Steve Bannon. And there's also some involvement with this one Chinese character, this one Chinese millionaire or billionaire. And there's some things tied into there. Was a laptop with the FBI? Have anyone in the Joe Biden family denied the fact that the actual emails were from Hunter Biden? This guy, something Bubalinsky, came out with an interview in Tucker Carlson's show. Tucker Carlson came out and said they were sending some original documents through UPS or someone, and they mysteriously disappeared, and UPS is looking into it. It's really funny Babylon Bee thing where they say, like, I just saw like Hillary Clinton wearing a fake beard and the fake things, like, oh, that's how it was lost. But with that one, I'm like, Tucker, come on. You guys didn't actually take images or copies of the actual thing. You have Project Veritas, I mentioned before, and going back to the Tucker thing, come on! He just mentioned this last time. Like, if this actual documents, if this was actual content, you're saying you took a picture of the box or the package, but not the actual content that was inside? Come on! Okay, so back to Project Veritas. They're finding different cases of actual voter fraud and vote harvesting and different things, and some of these things are just being denied. And I've talked to other people who are not following politics anywhere as close to I am. Chances are, if you found my channel and you found this content and you actually listen to this, chances are you actually search out this information more in the top 10%, more than 90% of the people out there. There's a good chance that's how it is. So I was trying to get my feelers out with just regular people. And the information they have is actually limited. Part of why Twitter and Facebook, the CEOs, Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg, were talking to Congress is in large part due to the fact that them actually putting a slowdown and censoring this information has an effect, because most people just get their information from the mainstream media and more in a superfluous nature. They don't actually directly get the things. So there's going to be a lot of surprises when Trump wins, I think, in a decisive fashion, because of the messaging going on. People have been thinking that it's actually more towards Biden. Or with some people, they've only heard negative things about Trump and haven't heard any of the suspect things about Joe Biden, that they might just say, yeah, we'll just settle for Biden because, yeah, he might not be overwhelming us in his amazingness, but we haven't heard anywhere close to anything as negative as a fraction of the things we've heard about Trump. And that's the kind of situation that goes. And that's going to be problematic. But a good reminder to everyone, if you listen to this, no matter where you are in the world, especially people in the United States of America, the America and the world is exactly the same, pretty much exactly the same today as it will be on November 4th after after you find out that Trump has won. They might not announce it right then because of the way the votes are going to come in and be counted, but things like that. It's still going to be the same world. You might know different things about it. You might think different things. You might have other things confirmed, but it's the same world. It's not this whole Dems dark winter thing. If if you are someone that knows somebody on the political left and you care for them, you might want to talk to them, might want to be around them. They might need some support. You might need to give some head pats and some squitches and some kind of condolences, consoling for them, because people are thinking about things in an entirely different way. Okay, so that's been kind of long. Let's get into the actual reading right now from Glenn Greenwald here. My resignation from the Intercept. The same trends of repression, censorship, and ideological homogeneity plaguing the national press generally have engulfed the media outlet I co-founded, culminating in censorship of my own articles. Today I sent in my intention to resign from The Intercept, the news outlet I co-founded in 2013 with Jeremy Scahill and Laura Poitras, as well as from its parent company, First Look Media. The final precipitating cause is that The Intercept's editors, in violation of my contractual right to editorial freedom, censored an article I wrote this week, refusing to publish it unless I remove all sections critical of Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden. The candidate vehemently supported by all New York-based Intercept editors involved in this effort at suppression. The censored article, based on recently revealed emails and witness testimony, raised critical questions about Biden's conduct. Not content to simply prevent publication of this article at the media outlet I co-founded, these Intercept editors also demanded that I refrain from exercising a separate contractual right to publish this article with any other publication. I had no objection to their disagreement with my views of what this Biden evidence shows. As a last-ditch attempt to avoid being censored, I encouraged them to air their disagreements with me by writing their own articles that critique my perspectives and letting readers decide who was right, the way any confident and healthy media outlet would. But modern media outlets do not air dissent, they quash it. So censorship of my article, rather than engagement with it, was the path these Biden-supporting editors chose. The censored article will be published on this page shortly. It is now published here, and maybe I'll read it. Let me think about it, actually. Let me just get through this first and then see about reading that other one. My letter of intent to resign, which I sent this morning to First Look Media's President Bloom, is published below. As of now, I'll be publishing my journalism here on Substack, where numerous other journalists, including my good friend, the great Intercept reporter Matt Taibbi, have come in order to practice journalism free of their increasingly repressive climate that is engulfing national mainstream media outlets across the country. Okay, yeah, so I was thinking of which one Matt Taibbi is actually using, and it turns out to be Substack. Okay. This was not an easy choice. I am voluntarily sacrificing the support of a large institution and guaranteed salary in exchange for nothing other than a belief that there are enough people who believe in the virtues of independent journalism and the need for free discourse who are willing to support my work by subscribing. Like anyone with young children, a family, and numerous obligations, I do this with some trepidation, but also with a conviction that there is no other choice. I could not sleep at night knowing that I allowed any institution to censor what I want to say and believe. Least of all, a media outlet I co-founded with the explicit goal of ensuring that this never happens to other journalists, let alone me, let alone because I have written an article critical of a powerful Democratic politician vehemently supported by the editors in an imminent national election. But the pathologies, illiberalism, and repressive mentality that led to the bizarre spectacle of my being censored by my own media outlet are ones that are by no means unique to the Intercept. These are the viruses that have contaminated virtually every mainstream center-left political organization, academic institution, and newsroom. I began writing about politics 15 years ago with the goal of combating media propaganda and repression, and regardless of the risks involved, simply cannot accept any situation, no matter how secure or lucrative, that forces me to submit my journalism and right to free expression to its suffocating constraints and dogmatic dictates. From the time I began writing about politics in 2005, journalistic freedom and editorial independence have been sacrosanct to me. 15 years ago, I created a blog on the free Blogspot software when I was still working as a lawyer. Not with any hopes of or plans of starting a new career as a journalist, but just as a citizen concerned about what I was seeing with the war on terror and civil liberties, and wanting to express what I believed needed to be heard. It was a labor of love, based on an ethos of cause and conviction, dependent on a guarantee of complete editorial freedom. It thrived because the readership I built knew that. Even when they disagreed with particular views I was expressing, I was a free and independent voice, unwedded to any faction, controlled by nobody, endeavoring to be as honest as possible about what I was seeing, and always curious about the wisdom of seeing things differently. The title I chose for that blog, Unclaimed Territory, reflected the spirit of liberation from captivity to any fixed political or intellectual dogma or institutional constraints. When Salon offered me a job as a columnist in 2007, and then again when The Guardian did the same in 2012, I accepted their offers on the condition that I would have the right, except in narrowly defined situations, such as articles that could create legal liability for the news outlet, to publish my articles and columns directly to the internet without censorship, advanced editorial interference, or any other intervention permitted or any other intervention permitted or approval needed. Both outlets revamped their publication system to accommodate this condition, and over the many years I worked with them, they always honored these commitments. When I left The Guardian at the height of the Snowden reporting in 2013 in order to create a new media outlet, I did not do so, needlessly to say, in order to impose upon myself more constraints and restrictions on my journalistic independence. The exact opposite was true. The intended core innovation of The Intercept above all else was to create a new media outlet where all talented, responsible journalists would enjoy the same right of editorial freedom I had always insisted upon for myself. As I told former New York Times executive editor Bill Keller in a 2013 exchange we had in the New York Times about my critiques of mainstream media journalism and the idea behind The Intercept, editors should be there to empower and enable strong, highly factual, aggressive adversarial journalism, not to serve as roadblocks to neuter or suppress the journalism. End quote. When the three of us, as co-founders, made the decision early on that we would not attempt to manage the day-to-day operations of the new outlet so that we could instead focus on our journalism, we negotiated the right of approval for senior editors and especially the editor-in-chief. The central responsibility of the person holding that title was to implement, in close consultation with us, the unique journalistic vision and journalistic values on which we founded this new media outlet. Chief among these values was editorial freedom, the protection of a journalist's right to speak in an honest voice, and the airing, rather than suppression of dissent from mainstream orthodoxies and even collegial disagreements with each other. That would be accomplished, above all else, by ensuring that journalists, once they fulfill the first duty of factual accuracy and journalistic ethics, would be not just permitted, but encouraged to express political and ideological views that deviated from mainstream orthodoxy and those of their own editors, to express themselves in their own voice of passion and conviction, rather than stuffed into the corporatized, contrived tone of artificial objectivity, above it all omnipotence, and to be completely free of anyone else's dogmatic beliefs or ideological agenda, including those of the three co-founders. The current iteration of The Intercept is completely unrecognizable when compared to that original vision. Rather than offering a venue for airing dissent, marginalized voices, and unheard perspectives, it is rapidly becoming just another media outlet with mandated ideological and partisan loyalties, a rigid and narrow range of permitted viewpoints, ranging from establishment liberalism to soft leftism, but always anchored in the ultimate support of the Democratic Party. A deep fear of offending hegemonic cultural liberal and center-left Twitter luminaries, and an overarching need to secure the approval and admiration of the very mainstream media outlets we created The Intercept to oppose, critique, and subvert. As a result, it is a rare event indeed when a radical freelance voice unwelcome in mainstream precincts is published in The Intercept. Outside reporters or writers with no claim to mainstream acceptability, exactly the people we set out to amplify, have almost no chance of being published. It is even rarer for The Intercept to publish content that would not fit very comfortably in at least a dozen or more center-left publications of similar size which predated its founding, from Mother Jones to Vox and even MSNBC. Courage is required to step out of line, to question and poke at these pieties, most sacred in one's own milieu. But fear of alienating the guardians of liberal orthodoxy, especially on Twitter, is a predominant attribute of The Intercept's New York-based editorial leadership team. As a result, The Intercept has all but abandoned its core mission of challenging and poking at, rather than appeasing and comforting, the institutions and guardians most powerful in its cultural and political circles. Making all of this worse, The Intercept, while gradually excluding the co-founders from any role in its editorial mission or direction, and making one choice after the next, to which I vocally objected as a betrayal of our core mission, continued publicly to trade on my name in order to raise funds for journalism it knew I did not support. It purposely allowed the perception to fester that I was the person responsible for its journalistic mistakes in order to ensure that blame for those mistakes was heaped on me rather than the editors who were consolidating control and were responsible for them. The most egregious, but by no means only, example of exploiting my name to evade responsibility was the reality winner debacle. As the New York Times recently reported, that was the story in which I had no involvement whatsoever. While based in Brazil, I was never asked to work on the documents which Winner sent our New York newsroom, with no request that any specific journalist work on them. I did not even learn of the existence of that document until very shortly prior to its publication. The person who oversaw, edited, and controlled that story was Betsy Reed, which was how it should have been, given the magnitude and complexity of that reporting and her position as editors-in-chief. It was the Intercept editors who pressured the story's reporters to quickly send those documents for authentication to the government because they were eager to prove to mainstream media outlets and prominent liberals that the Intercept was willing to get on board the Russiagate train. They wanted to counteract the perception created by my articles expressing skepticism about the central claims of that scandal, that the Intercept had stepped out of line on a story of high importance to US liberalism and even the left. That craving to secure the approval of the mainstream media outlets we set out to counteract was the root cause for the speed and recklessness with which that document from Winner was handled. But the Intercept, to this very day, has refused to provide any public accounting of what happened in the reality Winner story, to explain who the editors were who made mistakes and why any of it happened. As the New York Times article makes clear, that refusal persists to this day, notwithstanding vocal demands from myself, Scahill, Laura Poitras, and others that the Intercept, an institution that demands transparency from others, has the obligation to provide it for itself. The reason for this silence and this cover-up is obvious. Accounting to the public about what happened in the reality Winner story would reveal who the actual editors are who are responsible for that deeply embarrassing newsroom failure. And that would negate their ability to continue to hide behind me and let the public continue to assume that I was the person at fault for a reporting process from which I was completely excluded from the start. That is just one example illustrating the frustrating dilemma of having a newsroom exploit my name, work, and credibility when it is convenient to do so, while increasingly denying me any opportunity to influence its journalistic mission and editorial direction, all while pursuing an editorial mission completely anathema to what I believe. Despite all of this, I did not want to leave the Intercept. As it deteriorated and abandoned its original mission, I reasoned to myself, perhaps rationalized, that as long as the Intercept at least continued to provide me the resources to personally do the journalism I believe in, and never to interfere in or impede my editorial freedom, I could swallow everything else. But the brute censorship this week of my article about the Hunter Biden materials and Joe Biden's conduct regarding Ukraine and China, as well my critique of the media's rank-closing attempt in a deeply unholy union with Silicon Valley and the, quote, intelligence community, end quote, to suppress its revelations, eroded the last justification I could cling to for staying. It meant that not only does this media outlet not provide the editorial freedom to other journalists, as I had so hopefully envisioned 7 years ago, but now no longer even provides it to me. In the days heading into the presidential election, I am somehow silenced from expressing any views that random editors in New York find disagreeable, and now somehow have to conform my writings and reporting to cater to their partisan desires and eagerness to elect specific candidates. To say that such censorship is a red line for me, a situation I would never accept no matter the cost, is an understatement. It is astonishing to me, but also a reflection of our current discourse and illiberal media environment, that I have been silenced about Joe Biden by my own media outlet. Numerous other episodes were also contributing causes to my decision to leave. The Reality Winner cover-up, the decision to hang Li Fang out to dry, and even force him to apologize when a colleague tried to destroy his reputation by publicly, baselessly, and repeatedly branding him racist. Its refusal to report on the daily proceedings of the Assange extradition hearing because the freelance reporter doing an outstanding job was politically distasteful. Its utter lack of editorial standards when it comes to viewpoints on reporting that flatter the beliefs of its liberal base. The Intercept published some of the most credulous and false affirmations of maximalist Russiagate madness, and horrifyingly took the lead in falsely branding the Hunter Biden archive as, quote, Russian disinformation, end quote, by mindlessly and uncritically citing, of all things, a letter by former CIA officials that contained this baseless insinuation. I know it sounds banal to say, but even with all these frustrations and failures, I am leaving and writing this with genuine sadness, not fury. That news outlet is something I and numerous close friends and colleagues poured an enormous amount of our time and energy, passion, and love into building. The Intercept has done great work. Its editorial leaders and first look managers steadfastly supported the difficult and dangerous reporting I did last year with my brave young colleagues at the Intercept Brazil to expose corruption at the highest levels of the Bolsonaro government, and stood behind us as we endured threats of death and imprisonment. It continues to employ some of my closest friends, outstanding journalists whose work, when it overcomes editorial resistance, produces nothing but the highest admiration for me. Jeremy Scahill, Li Fang, Murtaza Hussain, Naomi Klein, Ryan Grimm, and others. And I have no personal animus for anyone there, nor any desire to hurt it as an institution. Betsy Reed is an exceptional smart editor and a very good human being with whom I developed a close and valuable friendship. And Pierre Omidyar, the original founder and publisher of First Look, always honored his personal commitment never to interfere in our editorial process, even when I was publishing articles directly at odds with his strongly held views, and even when I was attacking other institutions he was funding. I'm not leaving out of vengeance or personal conflict, but out of conviction and cause. And none of the critiques I have voiced out about the Intercept are unique to it. To the contrary, these are the raging battles over free expression and the right of dissent raging within every major cultural, political, and journalistic institution. That's the crisis that journalism, and more broadly, values of liberalism, faces. Our discourse is becoming increasingly intolerant of dissenting views, and our culture is demanding more and more submission to the prevailing orthodoxies imposed by self-anointed monopolists of truth and righteousness, backed up by armies of online enforcement mobs. And nothing is crippled by that trend more severely than journalism, which above all else requires the ability of journalists to offend and anger power centers, question or reject sacred pieties, unearth facts that reflect negatively especially on, the most beloved and powerful figures, and highlight corruption no matter where it is found and regardless of who is benefited or injured by its exposure. Prior to the extraordinary experience of being censored this week by my own news outlet, I had already been exploring the possibility of creating a new media outlet. I had spent a couple of months in active discussions with some of the most interesting and independent and vibrant journalists, writers, and commentators across the political spectrum about the feasibility of securing financing for a new outlet that would be designed to combat these trends. The first two paragraphs of our working document reads as follows. American media is gripped in a polarized culture war that is forcing journalism to conform to tribal, groupthink narratives that are often divorced from the truth and cater to perspectives that are not reflective of the broader public, but instead a minority of hyper-partisan elites. The need to conform to highly restrictive, artificial cultural narratives and partisan identities has created a repressive and illiberal environment in which vast swaths of news and reporting either do not happen or are presented through the most skewed and reality-detached lens. With nearly all major media institutions captured to some degree by this dynamic, a deep need exists for media that is untethered and free to transgress the boundaries of this polarized culture war and address a demand from a public that is starved for media that doesn't play for a side, but instead pursues lines of reporting, thought, and inquiry wherever they lead, without fear of violating cultural pieties or elite orthodoxies. And that's the end of the working document that they have for that, which I think is it's pretty good. It's a pretty good take. Okay, back to the actual article that he wrote here, and then we're getting up to the point where he puts the letter that he sent, the resignation letter. Okay. I have definitely not relinquished hope that this ambitious project can be accomplished, and I theoretically could have stayed at the Intercept until then, guaranteeing a stable and secure income for my family by swallowing the dictates of my new censors. But I would be deeply ashamed if I did that, and believe I would be betraying my own principles and convictions that I urge others to follow. So in the meantime, I have decided to follow in the footsteps of numerous other writers and journalists who have been expelled from increasingly repressive journalistic precincts for various forms of heresy and dissent, and who have sought refuge here. I hope to exploit the freedom this new platform offers, not only to continue to publish the independent and hard-hitting investigative journalism and candid analysis and opinion writing that my readers have come to expect, but also to develop a podcast and continue with the YouTube program System Update I launched earlier this year in partnership with the Intercept. To do that, to make this viable, I will need your support. People who are able to subscribe and sign up for a newsletter attached to this platform will enable my work to thrive and still be hard. Perhaps even more so than before. I began my journalism career by depending on my readers' willingness to support independent journalism, which they believe is necessary to sustain. It is somewhat daunting at this point in my life, but also exciting. To return to that model where one answers only to the public as a journalist should be serving. Okay, so that was it. And here is the letter of resignation. This is going to be quicker than before. I don't think I'm going to read the actual Joe Biden article in this one as we're getting close to the 40-minute point on this itself. I'll probably read it separately. I might post it up if I find it to be worth posting up as well. Maybe I'll start doing some of these also just as impromptu live reads because these are things that I want to read anyway, and maybe other people might want to hear an audio version of it and maybe converse and share some thoughts after it. I don't know. So here is a letter of resignation. Letter of intent to resign. It's a forwarded message. This is from Glenn Greenwald to Michael Bloom and Betsy Reed. Michael, I am writing to advise you that I have decided that I will be resigning from First Look Media, FLM, and The Intercept. The precipitating, but by no means, cause is that The Intercept is attempting to censor my articles in violation of both my contract and fundamental principles of editorial freedom. The latest and perhaps most egregious example is an opinion column I wrote this week, which, 5 days before the presidential election, is critical of Joe Biden, the candidate who happens to be vigorously supported by all of the Intercept editors in New York who are imposing the censorship and refusing to publish the article unless I agree to remove all of the sections critical of the candidate they want to win. All of that violates the right to, in my contract with FLM, to publish articles without editorial interference except in very narrow circumstances that plainly do not apply here. Worse, the Intercept editors in New York, not content to censor publication of my article at the Intercept, are also demanding that I do not exercise my separate contractual right with FLM regarding articles I have written, but which FLM does not want to publish itself. Under my contract, I have the right to publish any articles FLM rejects with other publication. But Intercept editors in New York are demanding I not only accept their censorship of my article at the Intercept, but also refrain from publishing it with any other journalistic outlet, and are using thinly disguised lawyer-crafted threats to coerce me to do so, proclaiming that it would be detrimental to the Intercept if I published it elsewhere. I have been extremely disenchanted and saddened by the editorial direction of the Intercept under its New York leadership for quite some time. The publication we founded without these editors back in 2014 now bears absolutely no resemblance to what we set out to build, not in content, structure, editorial mission, or purpose. I have grown embarrassed to have my name used as a fundraising tool to support what is doing, and for editors to use me as a shield to hide behind, to avoid taking responsibility for the mistakes, including but not only with the reality winner debacle, for which I was publicly blamed despite having no role in it, while the editors who actually were responsible for those mistakes stood by silently, allowing me to be blamed for their errors, and then covering up any public accounting of what happened, knowing that such transparency would expose their own culpability. But all this time, as things worsened, I reasoned that as long as the Intercept remained a place where my own right of journalistic independence was not being infringed, I could live with all of its other flaws. But now, not even that minimal but foundational right is being honored for my own journalism, suppressed by an increasingly authoritarian, fear-driven, repressive editorial team in New York, bent on imposing their ideological and partisan preferences on all writers while ensuring that nothing is published at the Intercept that contradicts their narrow, homogeneous ideological and partisan views. Exactly what the Intercept, more than any other goal, was created to prevent. I have asked my lawyer to get in touch with FLM to discuss how best to terminate my contract. Thank you, Glenn Greenwald. And with that, I also say thank you to Glenn Greenwald for writing this out. You can check him out at greenwald.substack.com to begin with. That's where this article is as well. You'll find that. You can subscribe to him and help him out. As I mentioned, I shall check out this article that he has, his uncensored article that he has on his coverage on the Hunter Biden situation that has been unfolding. Let me know what you think about this. If you think you'd like me to do some more of these live readings, I don't know when you're going to listen to this, how fast you're going to listen to it. I need to do a better job also of getting my information out there and see about this with Glenn Greenwald trying these different ways. Someone who's this public is still somebody who's like, okay, I'm going to try out these new things. I am this tiny little voice out here trying to do my little part. I thank the people who do listen, and to have some people who listen and give comments and interact, and much appreciated to you. Much appreciated to Stephen for having the conversation series with me and sharing this content with me and just enriching my life in that way. For me, information has been a key thing in using the internet and other tools to actually have this. We have these acquired information or acquired ignorance destruction systems with these human information vectors that I think are just amazing things to have, and that's AIDS and HIV. Positive things to do that. The HIV to destroy the AIDS, to use it as AIDS. So instead of that inverse way, just play with words. They're using the letters and alliterations. Not alliterations, I don't know if that's the right term to use here. But anyway, so that's been it for this one. It's been merchandise on the screen. As I mentioned, it was Don't Talk Ish, Keep Talking Ish, Stop Talking Ish, Don't Talk Ish, no, Don't Talk Ish, Stop Talking Ish, and No Talking Ish. So there's going to be merchandise for that. I'm going to be trying to tie those in. I'm going to be trying to put forward a better product, more informative, try to interact with you out there, and anybody who's willing to support and wants to support people like me or people like Glenn Greenwald. There's a lot of content out there. Don't despair. Many people are thinking that the world is ending. Whether you're in the political left, political right, the world is not going to end after this election. The world is still the world. People are still the people. There's things that you may think you want to say or you believe, but you feel you're in an environment where you can't say or believe these things. As human beings, we've made it through much darker times than this. Don't buy into that thing Joe Biden was saying, it's a dark winter coming. This damn dark winter, no. Even if you're Democrat or not, either way. If Trump happens to lose, I will still think the United States of America still has a constitution. It still has good people. It still has people that want information. Facts are facts. Reality is reality, despite who wins coming up in this election, despite the activities that happen after it. Whether you're at your job or not, after you say certain things, you still think those things. If you're not directly out there harming people actively, just try to speak more, or go out there and find the source and find the people who you feel are at least speaking out in a way that you think you might not be able to, and see if you can somehow contribute to them, even if it's sometimes just create some account that can't be trashed, some email account where you can actually comment and say just some word. I think I'm saying from personal experience that has helped me also, just having someone say, oh, I'm glad you posted this, and just interact with it. So even someone like Glenn Greenwald, just send him an email, just say thank you for the work that you've done. Maybe I can't speak in my position. I feel I can't speak for these decisions, but I encourage you, attempt, go out there and speak. You'll find that in most cases, it's not going to be anywhere close to as deadly and harmful as you may think it's going to be. Some of these people rely on your silence. They rely on you building that cage around yourself. And the truth will set you free. It sounds so trite right now, but the truth is the truth free? Is honesty free? This is something that I've also been contemplating. Is honesty a privilege? I'm thinking some of the people that can be completely honest are some of the most wealthy people in the world because they're untouchable. And then some of the people can also be completely honest as some of the poorest people at the bottom of the rung because what are you going to take away from them? Now, you're somewhere in the middle, chances are, if you listen to this. And there's a high chance that there's things you believe and think of that you can speak out on more that could be a help to somebody else. So I suggest you do that. Thank you for listening. Till next time, this has been Silas and Dying Alive. Going to be thinking about different platforms and different places to talk about these things. Goodbye. And again, thank you, Glenn Greenwald.